Chris Morgan. I'm live here with you from Bellingham, Washington, where I live up in the northwest of the United States, and I'm a bear ecologist and conservationist, and for this last 25 years or so I've been focused on the bears of the world. Jonathan is telling me to refresh my page, so just give me 1 second here, guys, while I do that. And if you can't see me, you should refresh your own page as well, and you should be able to see a little thumbnail icon of me in the corner. Let's see. There we go. All right. So now I can see the action. All right. This is a little strange for me, being able to see my image in the corner of the screen here. But what we're focused on is the bears. So I was just saying that I've, for this last 25 years, been lucky enough to work in various parts of the world on bear research and conservation and education projects. And I'm tuning in to you from Bellingham, Washington, in the northwest of the United States, where I live. And this is so fun. I'm super excited to be here with you, sharing these bears. Thanks to Courtney and Jonathan for setting this up, and with me here is my lovely assistant Carmen, who does not want to be on camera, but she's promised to show her face. She's going to be helping to feed me some questions. So you guys have got some questions for us, and this is an amazing scene here to me, because I'm so used to looking at this place. This is Brooks River in the heart of Katmai National Park in Alaska, and these are bears that I'm well used to seeing. And there's a good number of them there. It looks like it's raining right now. So these waterfalls are the hub of all this activity for brown bears in this part of Katmai, Alaska. There's giant national park there, and I always tell people, you know, every bear biologist in the world, it's their dream to go to this place and to see these bears, because there's really nowhere else like it on Earth for viewing these giant brown bears. And there's a good number of them there. So I've done trips to this place for 15 years or so now, taking groups of people to see the bears and learn about bear ecology, and it's been a really fun experience doing that. And then more recently we filmed in Alaska, in this part of Alaska, in Katmai National Park, for Bears of the Last Frontier, which was a PBS nature series that I hosted, and also for Great Bear Stakeout, which was a BBC Discovery show that came out last year. And I know a lot of you saw those shows, and it's been so cool seeing some of the questions that come through from everybody. So there's a question here that says, I've watched the Great Bear Stakeout 1 billion times. Wow, that's a lot. I love it. Whatever happened to Van and Alice, the Bonnie and Clyde of the bear world? Did they have cubs, or did they eventually eat each other? That's the first question. What a great one to start off with. So Bonnie and Clyde, or otherwise known as Van and Alice, they were bears on the coast, about 60 miles away from where this waterfall is here. Oh, there's some action going on there at the waterfall. Some bears having a bit of an altercation. Yeah, did you see that? There was a bear on the top of the waterfall and one down at the base, and they were squabbling over that spot there. There's not many fish jumping right now, so this is when things can get tense. If there is a fish to be had, then the bears tend to fight over it. So yes, Van and Alice. Back to the question. You know, what's up with Van and Alice? I've not been up to Katmai, this part of Alaska, this year, so I've not seen Van and Alice, unfortunately. But last year they really became. Van was this giant male. I've never seen a bear bigger than him, and Alice was the girlfriend that he chose, and they would just rampage across these mating meadows where all these bears gather every year on the coast of Katmai, and got into significant amounts of trouble. They ended up killing a bear there at one point. So what probably happened is, we know that they mated. We watched them and court and mate. Alice would have gone into her den in probably about October. Van would have gone into his den a bit later, perhaps even as late as December, because the big males are always the last to go into their winter dens. And then they would have come out in the spring, Van on his own, ready to cause mayhem again, and Alice probably with a litter of cubs, like some of the cubs you can see on this live cam. I noticed there's some really young cubs around this year, which is great to see. It means it was a good year last year, because the females don't generally have cubs unless they're fat and healthy enough to do so. So they've got to be healthy enough when they go into the den for that fertilized egg to start developing as a cub. and I noticed some young ones around here earlier on. One of them's a real tiny one. There's a litter of 3, and if you guys didn't watch it, there was a clip yesterday of this female with these 3 little cubs, and one of them was a runt. And Carmen here was just telling me that there was this amazing clip of them flowing off the waterfall. And so I just watched it. You can click on one of the archive pieces of footage here, and sure enough, she's standing at the top of the waterfall, the mother, and 2 of the cubs go washing off the waterfall right into the paws of the bear below, which gets pretty frantic and immediately jumps towards them. I don't know if it knew they were cubs or a fish, but pretty interesting to watch. There's another question coming here. Oh, good question. Well, how are bears doing in general in the world? We know they are good in Alaska, but how about the lower 48? I'm glad you asked that, because bears in the lower 48 are not doing really well. What we've been really good at as human beings is wiping them out. You know, when Lewis and Clark arrived a couple hundred years ago, they came across the western part of the state. They started running into grizzly bears, and that's when the killing of grizzly bears began. And it really never stopped. So in addition to direct killing, we've also wiped out these bears. And it's estimated that there used to be 50 or 100,000 grizzlies in the lower 48 states. 50 or 100,000. And now we've got more like 1,000, 1,500, somewhere in that region. And in just 5 states, and one of them is Washington State, where I live. So we've got it's a great example right here on the doorstep. We've got a handful of grizzly bears in the Washington Cascade, which is about an hour away from where I live here. But there might be as few as 5 or 4 or 3 individuals. It's just unbelievable how few there are. And we know that there were hundreds of them here. It's a great example of where there were once lots of grizzlies, there are very few of them now. So it's a pretty sad state of affairs. So yeah, they're doing reasonably well in Alaska. But in other parts of the world, we even have grizzly bears in Europe, believe it or not. We used to have them in Britain. You know, I'm from Britain originally. And 1,000 years ago, we had grizzly bears on the British Isles. I was in Scotland recently, and some of the forest, the intact Caledonian pine forest in Scotland, where grizzly bears and wolves used to roam, is still there. But even the forest is just eking out an existence. It's a tough place to be wild in Britain these days. So 1,000 years ago, bears were made extinct in Britain. I don't think they got along with Romans. And then in the 1700s, wolves were extinct in Britain. So we're really lucky to have places like Alaska, like at the falls here in Katmai. Superb wilderness, healthy environment, as long as we're smart and careful about it, where bears can be bears and do their thing. And just look at that. I'm counting, I don't know how many bears you see right here, but I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at least. I've got to tell you a wolf story as well from this place. Maybe Courtney can remind me to tell you this wolf story in a little while, because a wolf came down into these waterfalls a few years ago when I was there. It was the most mind-blowing thing I've seen. Next question. Any advice for a college student starting to make conservation a career? Preferred major or things to avoid? Great question. I'll try and keep it really positive. If you want to make a fortune in life or live in a financially viable way, then don't do it. But if you want to have a really adventurous, fun time of it and get to explore and do some good things for the planet at the same time and meet some of the most incredible people on Earth, then yes, definitely going into conservation is a good thing. You know, one of the things that I really try and encourage is for young people to explore it as a way of life. It's weird for me. It's not really a job. It's more of a vocation. It's kind of it's the way I spend my life. It's what I do, and I go to sleep thinking about it, and I wake up thinking about it, and I feel really, really fortunate. And I'm surrounded by amazing people that make it all happen. And my right hand person is sitting to my right now, Carmen, my assistant, and there are a lot of people that make what I do possible, and I'm lucky to work with the best people in the world, so I find myself very, very fortunate. But yeah, I guess, one thing, if you are a student and you're looking into getting into conservation, and what I did, I worked for years for nothing, and worked for a lot of years as a volunteer, just networking, getting word out, going to wildlife conferences, going to bear conferences in my case with the IBA, this International Bear Association, and just getting out there and meeting people, and then volunteering and just putting yourself out as someone who's passionate and into it for all the right reasons. And and networking, getting to know people, and then just filling your brain with as much experience and knowledge as you can along the way. But it really comes down to just getting your name out there and getting your face out there and getting the experience that you need to really make a mark and get in touch with the right people. Okay, I'm waffling. Courtney, feel free to tell me to hurry up if I'm talking too much. Next question. Wow, what is your most memorable experience with the bears? That's always a really, really difficult one. Partly because there are so many of them. I've been charged a couple of times. That's always a memorable experience. I think there's something that really triggers your primal brain, that little synapse in the back of our brain that most of us have lost touch with because we don't live in the woods anymore. But when you've got a 1,000-pound bear charging your way, trying to give you a not very subliminal message, it's pretty mind-blowing. Those moments really stick with me. But that's from the fear perspective. That kind of the fear and agitation and anxiety is what sticks with me from that. But from the pure wonder point of view, when I was 18 years old, I got into bear conservation and bear research. I was visiting the States, and I went out with this guy into the field in New Hampshire. He was studying black bears there, and I'd never even thought about bears as an 18-year-old from Britain at that point. Went out into the field, bugged this guy for a couple of weeks until he finally said, yeah, come on, I'll take you out into the field just to shut you up. And went out into the field, and I couldn't believe it. He drove me into town as opposed to into the forest. And when we got into town in Berlin, in northern New Hampshire, we pulled up. I thought we were going to your study site. And he said, yeah, we are. This is it. And I said, this is the city dump. And he goes, yeah, I know. So we ended up pulling up to the city dump, and there were 14 black bears under the moonlight, all sitting on this big pile of garbage in rural New Hampshire. And this was his study subject. So I helped him tranquilize and capture black bears, the first bears I'd ever laid eyes on. This is 25 years ago. And 25 years ago? Something like that, yeah. First bears I'd laid eyes on. And we traipsed around the garbage dump all night, capturing these bears and following them and trying to learn about their needs and their habitat requirements. It was mind-blowing. So that's a moment that will always stick with me forever. But more recently, Bear Trek is a film that we're working on right now, and I'd love to tell you guys more about it if Courtney wants me to. One of the locations we filmed for Bear Trek, which is this heart and soul project that me and the team are working on right now, was in Peru. And I've never seen anything like it. The bears in Peru do incredible things in this one particular location. Bears actually climb these rock walls, and it's a wall as flat and vertical as a wall in your office. And they actually cling onto the side of the wall and try to pursue these snails that are stuck underneath the rock ledges. So they eat snails and they eat wood, the hardcore wood of trees. And it's just mind-blowing what these bears do, and I've never seen anything like it. And I've searched for bears for years on and off in Ecuador, but this opportunity in Peru last year, I saw them for the first time. And not only was it my first Andean spectacle bear, but it was a bear doing these insanely remarkable, agile, athletic moves up this rock wall. It was quite something. So there's a few memorable experiences with bears. Thanks for your question. What do bears need to thrive in all of their habitat, not just in places like Alaska? What can we do to help? Oh, that's a really great question. I love hearing from people when they want to help bears. To me, it's as much about world peace as it is about bears, because bears represent these wildest of places on the planet. So if you protect bears, you protect wilderness, and you protect fresh water, clean air, intact forests, all of the things that we all need. Humans need those things, and countless millions of other species need those things as well. We know that there are about 3 million known species on Earth, and every one of them needs fresh air, clean water, and space to live in. So if you protect bears, you end up protecting all these big, wild, intact areas because they need those spaces to thrive. So a good place to go, if you go to ybears.org, there's a really good short film that we created that shows exactly what bears are to conservation and to wilderness and to us. So check out Why Bears, because it's just a really nice video that explains their value in the ecosystem. So they're indicator species, they're ambassadors for the wild, they are what we call umbrella species, and they are keystone species as well. So what can we do to help? Well, go to some of these organizations that are helping bears, and a lot of them are listed at whybears.org. It was just a short film that was made possible by some kind people, Karine and Anna, who donated money to make this film work. So we created the film for anybody to use and enjoy, and it's there online at whybears.org. So watch the film, send it to your friends, use it at college to do presentations about wildlife, download it, own it, share it, and then be in touch with the organizations that are doing really good things for bears. There's lots of them in the world, including Explore. I mean, look at this. What are these bears up to now? I've got to see. Let's see. This is, yeah, this food. So when the bears are here at this salmon run, all preoccupied with the fish, it's all they want to know. You know, they get very, very focused, and so the competition between bears can be really high, and it's super entertaining watching them. I've spoken to so many colleagues and people and showed them this camera, and they are just blown away by it. And I love it because I'm usually here watching these bears live at Brooks River, but I can't be there this year, so this is a really nice alternative. Something big just splashed over there, didn't it? Can you see that? Oh yeah, it's a bear up against the rock wall at the other side. So these brown bears, they're called brown bears, and in the lower 48 we call them grizzly bears. And in the interior of Alaska they tend to call them grizzly bears as well. But they're all the same species, Ursus arctos, and you find them all around the northern hemisphere of the planet. So you find them in Italy, or you used to find them all around the northern hemisphere, that's their range. But you find them in Italy, you find them in Romania, you find them in northern Spain, believe it or not, has brown bears, about 70 or 80 of them left. Even the French Pyrenees has had brown bears, and tiny number of them still left there. But in Alaska, there's nowhere quite like it. On the Alaska Peninsula, there's an estimated 6,000 brown bears. So you compare that to, you know, there probably aren't 6,000 brown bears in the whole of Europe, but just on this one Alaskan peninsula, there are a high density of them. So it's a real treat to see them. Just wonderful to watch these bears doing their thing. All right, next question. Let's see. Aren't bears solitary animals usually? And if so, how is it that they all seem to be getting along at the falls? What a great question. Yeah, how are these bears getting along at the falls here? There's a couple of things going on. Bears are generally solitary, but when there is a lot of food concentrated in one area, and it's really valuable food, think about it, these bears are all they're thinking about is calories. And so when they have an opportunity like this, where these fish is sort of funneled into this falls section from the open ocean where they've been for the last couple of years, these sockeye salmon are coming in, and they're trying to make their way upstream and lay their eggs. So it's a real funnel that they're going through, and they've got to run the gauntlet in this particular situation because the bears, they're all there waiting for them. So if you look at it from the perspective of the salmon, it's a pretty desperate, sad situation. These fish, on average, about one of these eggs that they lay, and they lay 4,000 of them at a time, about one of them makes it to maturity. And that one fish makes it up to its spawning ground, lays its eggs, and then dies. So the last gateway that these fish have to get through is these bears, and the bears know that. So it's all about these bears feeding. And when they're in this situation feeding, it's about the maximum number of calories for the minimum amount of effort, basically is what it comes down to. Not that they're lazy, they're smart, and they're physiologically trying to figure out and trying to make sure that they get the maximum amount of food, the maximum amount of fat especially, for the minimum amount of effort. Just like you or I, you burn off calories by exercise. That's good for us if you don't want to be fat. The bears want to be fat. What they're preparing for is a life in their winter den for several months, sometimes 6 or 7 months in a winter den. And if they're not fat enough, it jeopardizes their survival and their health in that winter den. So they've got to be, the fatter, the better, which is pretty amazing how they remain healthy. So the bears in this situation know that. So in answer to your question, you said, aren't they usually solitary? What are they all doing here at the falls, and why are they getting along? Well, if you notice, they're all kind of equally spaced out, and that's an intentional thing. They're not right at each other's shoulders. They're not creeping up on each other from behind. They're all glancing around. It might look like they're all ignoring each other, but they all know exactly where they are, and they're kind of looking left and looking right and making sure they know where Barney is and where Lurch is and where Greg the bear is, and they've got this peripheral vision going on. So they're equally spaced, and it's worth the risk, them being involved in this really quite unusual scenario of all these bears packed into this place. That's why in our Bears of the Last Frontier film, we called it the Manhattan of bear country. This is where the bears are packed in like a city of bears, shoulder to shoulder. But it's unusual, and the reason is there's food there. It's worth the risk for them. Are my answers long-winded enough for you? Next question: Is there any active study being done on the interbreeding of grizzlies and polar bears in northern Alaska at this time? Good question. I don't know the answer to that. Grizzlies and polar bears have hybridized, and in fact, the polar bears that have become pregnant have actually given birth to cubs that are reproductively viable, which is really interesting, and I'll explain why. Because grizzlies and polar bears are supposedly different species, and they're considered different species because they're not supposed to be able to mate and have fertile offspring. It's the definition of a species, but they've proven that that's wrong, and we didn't think it happened in the wild very much. But one theory is that perhaps due to climate change, it's affecting the movement patterns of polar bears and grizzly bears, and there are opportunities for them to be in close proximity to each other these days like there weren't in the past. And scientists used to think, it doesn't happen in captivity, it certainly doesn't happen in the wild, but these grizzlies and polar bears will actually breed and produce fertile offspring. So it's a really interesting hybrid that is the result. I don't know about any research going on that topic, but certainly it is happening. Let's see here. Next question. Oh wow, yeah. What are your thoughts on those individuals who have lost their lives while filming and following and living with bears in their own environment? Wow. I think about that a lot. So what are your thoughts on those individuals who have lost their lives while filming, following and living with bears in their own environment? Wow, these bears are such incredibly charismatic animals, and they attract all kinds of people to studying them, wanting to see them in the wild, wanting to learn from them, wanting to immerse themselves in bear country. For me, it's about being in bear country. It's not about being close to bears, it's about being in bear country, because when I'm in bear country, it's very much this feeling of it's a primal thing, you feel like you're going back in time, and as we say in one of our films, it's the way the world once was, and there's something really quite incredible about that feeling. And when I go back to Britain and I hike around the Lake District or Scotland and I find myself shouting, "Hey bear," there's really no need to be shouting "Hey bear," I just do it by accident, and kind of catch myself. There's no bears to warn of your presence there, and there haven't been for 1,000 years, but in places like Alaska, where they're thick on the ground, there is this attraction to going to these places. And yes, lots of people have filmed bears in Alaska, and lots of people have got close to them, and it's definitely not something that I seek to do, is to get close to bears. We never approach the bears. It's always up to the bears to approach us if they want to, and sometimes the safest thing in that part of the world is to stand your ground and just let the bear do what it does. And so I'm sure some of you have seen clips of me quite close to, and the film crew quite close to bears, but that's never us approaching them. It's a very respectful thing. They're always approaching us, and not because there's anything for them to approach for. There's certainly no food involved, and you've got to be super, super careful about not attracting them for the wrong reasons. But people end up being killed in bear country, infrequently, but it does happen. And when it happens when it's related to film, it's tragic, because it can mean that people have been trying to do the wrong thing and behaving in inappropriate ways. And it's a tragedy. I think that all the people involved in doing this work, they'll love bears and love wild places. So I don't take that away from them. But trying to approach them and trying to do things that are inappropriate with a big wild animal that is certainly not tame is not where I want to be. So yeah, it's a tricky subject, and I just encourage people to be safe in bear country. And there's lots of ways of doing it. In fact, I've got a table full of I like little show and tell things. I've got a table full of things here. Always carry this stuff. This is bear spray. It's a great thing to carry. And anybody who knows bears and spends time in bear country should be carrying bear spray. This stuff will help you keep safe in an encounter with a bear. The worst thing you want to do is surprise a bear, because they can go into this sudden encounter defensive response, and that's not what you want. So that's why I say make lots of noise, let the bear know that you're coming, carry bear spray. There are tons of things you can do to stay safe in bear country. Lots of noise, carry bear spray, camp really safely, so make sure that when you're in bear country you're camping in a place where you're not likely to encounter bears, where you're not on a fresh trail, where there's not food that's going to attract a bear. Never keep your food in your tent. Always make sure that your stinky items are kept in, ideally, one of these. This is a bear-resistant food container, and this is one called a bear keg. These work really well. You put your food and your toothpaste and snacks and candy treats in something like this when you're camping, and it's a great way to keep bears out of your food and bears out of your tent, of course. The last thing anybody wants is an encounter like that in the middle of the night. So these bear-resistant food containers and bear sprays can be really good things. So there's lots of ways to stay safe and smart in bear country. Next question. What do you want to see done to decrease habitat fragmentation? Wow, awesome question again. These are really great questions. Thank you, guys. I think the biggest thing that wildlife needs is room to roam. There's an amazing project out there called Room to Roam. You guys should look it up. One of the projects that they have is Yellowstone to Yukon, where they're trying to connect habitat all along the corridor from the Yukon in the north to Yellowstone National Park in the south. It's an awesome endeavor, because what bears, wolves, wolverine, woodland caribou, all of these large species need is room to roam. They need space between these chunks of protected areas, like right here where we're looking on the camera, Katmai National Park. It's great if you have these national parks, but when they're in isolation, they need things to connect to, and they need the habitat corridors between one protected spot and the next protected spot. And really the only thing that makes that happen is public pressure. I mean, the places around the world where we just simply shouldn't be operating as humans, where we should have wild, intact places for animals like bears, wolves, caribou to exist. And where we don't, it's not just those animals that are losing out, it's all of us. We all need those wild places for the fresh water, the resources that we need, the clean air that we need. Without them, we're kind of in trouble. So, I think that it's up to all of us to get engaged in conservation in our own small way and just make it a part of everyday life. And if it means a quick note on a website to a senator, or if it means joining an organization that supports these things, joining the Nature Conservancy. There's another great group called Vital Ground. If you're into bears, wow, they're an awesome organization. Vitalground.org. If you go to them, what they do is they purchase chunks of habitat in North America especially that are beneficial for bears, so then beneficial for countless other species as well. They purchase that land and they protect it, and they work with landowners on private land as well, so that they can make sure that those areas are going to be wild forever. And we all need those things. And I think, as stewards of the land, isn't it like really up to us to take it upon ourselves as this smart species to be doing what we can. Plus, it's the right thing to do, but plus it's exciting, rewarding work. And there's lots of great people out there focused on it. I mentioned it before, but go and take a look at the YBears website, ybears.org, and it's got a 3-minute video there that shows you the value of bears and what we can do and which places around the world would benefit by us protecting bears. 8 bear species in the world, and we're looking at one of them right now on the cam. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 brown bears, 6 brown bears there I can see right now, all fishing at Brooks River Falls. And this is a place that I've been going to for about 15 years now. There's one bear over at the back wall there, just keeps on splashing right into the water. And it's quite interesting. Some of these bears are kind of new to it, and they're usually not right at these primo spots at the falls. Some of the bears, though, are further away. Some of the bears that are used to it and that are the more dominant ones. Look at this guy coming in here. This is a big bear coming in. Talking about dominant bears. Let's see if we can follow him. This guy looks like he's going to walk right into the heart of the falls, into one of the best spots. Right behind this guy in what we call the jacuzzi. This is the jacuzzi in the foreground. So these bears will, some of the big dominant males, they know exactly where they're going. That's their spot. And it's kind of like the guy who has the regular spot at the bar. You know, everyone else clears out. When Hank shows up to sit at the bar, that's where he always sits. With these guys, these bears know exactly where they belong in this hierarchy. And the younger, smaller ones don't get a look in. But up here at the falls, it's the bigger ones that do. But yesterday, I was saying earlier on, there's this female with these 3 cubs. I wish we could see them on the cam this afternoon. 3 cubs, 2 of them were washed over the falls, and I've never seen that before. 15 years of going to this place, spending a lot of time around these bears, I've never seen these tiny little cubs of the year, you know, they're this big, washed off the top of the falls, almost into the jaws of a bear waiting down below the falls, so it was pretty incredible to see that. Okay, I'm getting lost in the bear cam here. Let's see what the questions are. We're up to number 10 here. The water must be extremely cold. Do they have enough fat or fur that the water temperature simply doesn't bother them? Yeah, exactly. You know, I've walked through this river with a pair of waders on when there weren't any bears there in October. And it's pretty astounding how cold it is, and the fact that they're not just standing in it ankle deep, you know, they're actually completely submerged, especially this male bear in the foreground. He's in this jacuzzi, and yeah, they've got enough fat on them to sustain them through this cold water. They do it pretty well. And I guess when you're so into fish, you're not thinking about anything else. You don't even think about the cold. These guys, oh, nice angle there. There's now a bear on the top of the falls. Looks like a female just from the shape of her. And often there's a female stands in that very spot. Like I say, they all know their place. Dominant bears, which can include dominant older females. These bears live till about 25 years old. So when they're in their prime, you know, and that's sort of 10 to 15, 18 years old, they can have the choice of any of these spots. And that top spot is a good one. The jacuzzi down below is also a good one. I've got to tell you this wolf story, though. When I was there a few years ago, and it just shows that, you know, these animals all have their different techniques. I don't know if the person controlling the camera can hear me, but if you're able to zoom over to the other side of the falls there, to the right of the rock wall, and you could see it without zooming actually, there's this little trail that comes down between the trees and comes to the river there. Well, I was standing watching these bears one year, and there was a friend next to me with a really nice camera lens watching as well, and we couldn't believe our eyes. What popped up at that little trail spot was a wolf. And I'd never seen a wolf at the river before. Apparently it happens now and then, but you can't predict it. This wolf showed up at that little spot, and it ran along the rock wall. There were about 10 or 15 bears all in the falls, and none of them were catching anything. It was a pretty slow afternoon for fishing. And the wolf came down, it perched in the water for just a moment, sort of looking ahead of it, and saw a fish and jumped right on that fish. And the first one it jumped on, it grabbed in its teeth and carried it away, and all the bears were like, how do you do that? You know, it's really, really amazing to see. But it got even more incredible because the wolf disappeared, and I timed it, and, you know, after it had done this twice, I thought, wow, he's going to keep on coming back. He left and came back 8 minutes later, perched in the water again, all the bears were standing around, not having any fishing luck like they're not doing now. The wolf perched in this one little spot on the other side of the river there, boom, jumped in again, caught another fish, first time, ran away, 8 minutes later came back. So you know what he's doing. He was catching a fish and taking it back to a den. And so you know that den site is 4 minutes run one way and 4 minutes return. So it was gone for 8 minutes each time. It was just absolutely amazing. So yeah, there's the rock wall, and if the camera was to the right a little bit there, edged to the right, you could see the trail, and my goodness, wouldn't it be something if that wolf showed up on the camera at some point. And so, yeah, we knew that there was a wolf den close by. So it's not just the bears here that are fishing for these salmon; it's the wolves as well. All the more reason to really protect and look after these little gems of places that we can. God, it's just amazing seeing this scene. You know, like I say, I'm usually there, but it's just great to see it on this live cam. I've heard of people playing this in the background on their big screens in their office and at home, you know, and just leaving it on all day and hanging out with the bears. The one that you can see right in the middle there in that white water has got quite a big flesh wound on his back, and these bears get into battles once in a while, fighting over these fishing rights, and they'll have these wide open, gaping holes in their backs and in their flanks most often, and some of them look like they're literally 6 inches deep. And they'll sometimes turn all pussy and gangrenous looking. It looks just nasty. And then you'll come back a few months later, and the bears, you know, look like they've had surgery. They clean right up, and those wounds heal incredibly quickly. Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you could hear me on the camera, but you can see that trail now where the wolf came down a few years ago. And I will send some pictures to explore so that they can post them. This incredible sequence of photographs taken by my friend of this wolf jumping into the water and catching these fish. Okay, all right, that was the last question was what about the water? It's cold. You've mentioned bears as umbrella species. Can you elaborate on what that means for nature and for us and how we can read the weather, so to speak? Wow. Awesome, yeah. Bears as umbrella species, again, watch whybears.org. It's just a 3-minute film, and you'll get a really good feel for why those of us who work with bears do so. So umbrella species means that if you protect, so take one of these bears at the falls here, they might have a home range of 150 square miles. If you protect that one bear, you're protecting that 150 square miles. It's obvious, isn't it? You know, you protect the bear, protect its habitat needs, protect its area, that its home range. And we know what these home ranges are from a lot of bears around the world because of radio collars. Here's one right here. You put one of these radio collars on a bear, and you can monitor its movement patterns, and it'll tell you pretty much what it needs in life, which is an incredible thing, what technology can do for us these days. This one is cut to the shape and size of a wolf's neck, but we use exactly the same ones for grizzly bears. So you put this radio collar on a bear. It needs 150 square miles to survive. Protect that 150 square miles, you protect that bear, and the thousands of species, plants, animals, insects, everything underneath that bear, so that's why we call them an umbrella species. So just by default, even if the bear has nothing to do with a wolf or a butterfly or a plant, you end up protecting everything that bear, and it's everything that the ecosystem and those other species need in that bear's habitat. Pretty amazing. So that's the definition of an umbrella species. So imagine, therefore, if, like with the 8 bear species in the world, you've got them in places as diverse as Pakistan, Spain, Bolivia, Peru, Russia, you know, Romania, Italy, America, the United States, Canada. You know, if you were to put all of the 8 bear species together and treat them as umbrella species, so protecting what they need, you're protecting millions of species. And take sun bears, for example. We work in Bear Trek with an incredible character. His name is Sute Wong, and he's a sun bear biologist in Borneo. And these are the tiniest little bears in the world, the smallest bear species. But the world is on their shoulders because they live in one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. And as a result, in Borneo, if you protect this population of sun bears, as Sute Wong, the biologist, is trying to do, then you're protecting countless species just because they all occur in that same place. So they're pretty useful tools. And then the person who asked this question hinted at something else. How can we read the weather? I love that. How do we use bears as barometers for ecosystem health? Well, they are like barometers. They're like thermometers of what is going on out there. So, you know, as well as being umbrella species, they're also indicator species. So in certain places where you have certain bear species, they can be a real indicator of habitat quality in wilderness. And take, for example, grizzly bears. They need a certain amount of wild land in order to survive, to meet their needs, their food requirements and survival requirements, denning requirements, everything that they need in life. Once that wilderness, that level of wilderness is gone, then the bears are gone. So they're a barometer. They are this, like you say, they enable us to read the weather. And that's very much the case with species elsewhere, like spectacle bears in South America and sun bears in Borneo. Awesome question. Okay, I'm looking at the next one here. What's this? At a glance, how can you tell the difference between males and females? Great question. At a glance, it's really tough. It takes years of experience. These bears are tough to differentiate male from female. One of the things that you get with all bear species is sexual dimorphism, and that really means that one sex looks quite different to the other. And in the case of bears, the females are often half the size of the males. But of course, unless you've got them sitting side by side, you can't say, well, that one's half the size of that one, so it must be female, and that one must be a male. It doesn't work that way. And also you get younger bears that are smaller, and the big adults are larger. So size is not a good differentiating factor. But you know, the honest truth is, sometimes, even experts, we all have a hard time sexing bears. The best thing to do is to wait for them to pee. So the males pee between their legs forward, and the females pee backwards. And, you know, you can't go wrong, but you've got to be pretty patient and at a really good angle to wait for them and watch them pee. So that's the foolproof way. But I've got to say, this female at the top of the falls that you can see here, she's got that kind of, I hope it's a female after all this, otherwise I'm going to look like an idiot. She's got that really kind of rotund, fuller backside. So they tend to be sort of fatter in the rear end, the females. They've got those birth-giving hips kind of thing, you know, that real sort of, they're just sort of, they seem to gain weight in the rear end, the females, so they're fuller at the rear end than the males are. The males also have really wide heads, which is, you know, incredible to see some of these skulls. I could show you one in a second here. What's that? And then I'll show them what we mean. The skulls on the males, the zygomatic arch, as we call it. Thank you. This is you can see that. This is the skull of a large brown bear, a replica of a massive brown bear, exact proportions. This is the zygomatic arch here, this part of the skull, and it's really wide on males, and it's not quite as wide on females. So that is one way to be able to tell the difference between males and females. Sometimes, how long-winded can I be with this answer? Sometimes you can actually see the penile sheath of the male between the legs of the male, between the back legs of the male. So there's another way. And what else? Those are the other. Yeah, those are about it. What else have we got? Next question. How are we doing for time? Wow, it's 10 to 5. How did that happen? This has been fun. Oh, this is from 5-year-old Rio. Hi, Rio. Why do you drive your motorcycle on all of your Bear Trek trips? Rio, thank you for asking that question. Because I ride a motorcycle, it's what I do. So when I want to travel around the world or into the Cascade Mountains to get into really good bear country and bear habitat, I jump on my motorcycle. It's a BMW, it's a dual sport bike, so this dual sport means that it's comfortable on the road and it's comfortable off the road. So when I jump on it, I know that I can get to whichever forest road that I want to go to, and I can get off into the mountains. So I pack my camp stove and my sleeping bag and my tent and everything in there, and away I go. It's economical, it's environmental, it's fun, and it makes getting into these wild places really, really practical. You know, it's a great way to go. So yeah, Rio, thank you for that question. For those of you, thanks Rio also for talking about Bear Trek. For those of you who've not heard of Bear Trek, this is our next big thing. In fact, it was our first big thing, and now we're coming back to it because, whoa, okay, fight at the falls. What's going on there? Sorry about that. I just saw two. Oh, I missed that. Did you see something going on? Did it? Yeah. So the bear at the top of the falls there, which I think is that female, has now got her head really, really low, and that's a sign of submission. She's making sure that other bear that just came in and threatened her. I didn't see the beginning of that little scrap there, but he just went up. Then he just with his paws up on the falls. that's really a sign of submission. So she's making sure that he knows, okay, you want this spot, you can have this spot. Now she's looking cautiously over her shoulder to make sure that there's no other bear approaching. I think that might be the one in the jacuzzi there that approached her on the falls. Yeah, if you want to find out more about Bear Trek, I think Courtney's going to put a link up after this. And Bear Trek is this journey around the world to 4 different places that I take on the motorcycle Rio. So I take my trusty BMW and head to Borneo, Peru, Alaska, and the subarctic in Canada to find 4 different bear species. And the biologists who are dedicated to understanding them and trying to protect them. So it's an adventure, it's a conservation story, it's got culture in it, it's got the most mind-blowing scenery and incredible bear footage, and that's the spectacle bears that I was talking about earlier on. So if you go to beartrek.org, you can see a 90-second trailer there and some other clips, and please do it. I would love you to go to that website and see what we're doing with Bear Trek. It's a non-profit project, and all of the profits go back to conservation and go back to helping the bears themselves. Look at that scene. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bears in that Explore cam right now. That is awesome. Yeah, can you see how they're slowly pushing each other around? They've got this very they have a personal space issue for sure. And they're all equally spaced. There's a great shot of it right there. Equally spaced, and they know exactly who each of the other bears is. This is not random. They know which ones are a force to be reckoned with. They know which ones are easygoing. A lot of research has been done on the personalities of these bears. And, some of them are, one of the papers that you can read, I was looking at it the other day, there's some research that says some are intense and aggressive, some are lazy and docile, some are humorless and serious, others are more light-hearted and easygoing. It just sounds like a group of people at a party, doesn't it? But that's bears. They're all completely individual characters, so they all know that of each other. They know what each other's personalities are, and they roll with that. All right, let's see. Thanks for that question, Rio, about the bike. That's awesome. Next one. What are the most influential factors when you were growing up to inspire you to care about wildlife? Wow. The most influential factors. Definitely my parents, and definitely David Attenborough. Those are the two that for sure had the biggest influence on my life. My parents always took me to wild places, always took me camping, always took me hiking, and I was always really into it. And not every kid is, but and I'd be more into it than most once I got out there. I was always flipping rocks over, looking for snakes, and always had an ant farm as a kid. Always in the backyard, always, finding the next creature to understand and learn about and hang out with, whether it was earthworms or lizards or what have you. So my parents, Phil and Rob Morgan, I wonder if they're watching, Mum and Dad in England. I hope you are. My Mum and Dad. So them and David Attenborough. I've been watching David Attenborough's show since I was about 7 years old, starting with Life on Earth, and oh wow, how could you not be moved by him and everything that he shows us about our world on television? It's just mind-blowing stuff. And now I get to work with some of the people that work with David Attenborough, and it's I don't know how to describe it. It's incredibly humbling. It's something I never saw coming, and I'm just loving it. Love the opportunity to share what I love about wildlife with people who want to be alongside and learn and be inspired by it and see some of our incredible planet. Yeah. What species of animals are brown bears friendly with? What a funny and good question. What species of animals are brown bears friendly with? Not many. Let me think. Wow, that's got me thinking. I mean, I've seen brown bears, and my buddy Brad Josephs, who was also in Great Bear Stakeout, the BBC show and Discovery show. Brad has seen a lot of bears and wolves hanging out in Katmai, on the coastal area of this national park on the Alaska Peninsula in Alaska. Now, not to say that they're buddies or they get along necessarily, wolves and bears, but he has seen bears and wolves interacting in a way that really just looks like play. But it's a rare thing. Bears tend to kind of keep to themselves. They're pretty solitary. They can be pretty defensive. we all know you don't want to get between a mom and her cubs. So yeah, it's a tough one to answer. That. What other animals are brown bears friendly with? Not many of them. Let's see here. We've got about 5 more minutes. We can go on a little bit later though if you want, because I know we had some technical hitches at the beginning. So if you guys want to carry on for a few minutes, I can definitely stick around. What else do I have to show you here? I've got a couple more show and tell things for you. This is kind of intriguing. This is what I carry around to show the size of a brown bear cub when it's born. Imagine that. It's the size and weight of a squirrel, about a pound in weight. These guys are born hairless, blind, deaf, pretty much incapable of anything. So imagine that giant female, and she might weigh 600 pounds, 700 pounds, big, fat, healthy female, plopping out a little squirrel-sized bear cub like this in the middle of the winter den. Snow covered the winter den. She's up in the mountains in a nice secure place. She's buried herself into the ground. Snow has covered the entrance, and this is what pops out and joins her in that den. And when it does, it then immediately makes its way to her teat so that it can start nursing. And then it grows at an unbelievable rate. These guys can weigh 100 pounds within a year, so that's a hundredfold increase in weight from when they're born to being a 1-year-old cub a year later. And they can stay with the female for up to 4 years in this place. Usually 3 years, but grizzlies, brown bears that we're watching here, they can stay up to 4 years. And one theory is that they need to stay with mum that long just to figure out the lie of the land socially, because there's so many bears in this one spot. They have to figure out, what does it take to be a bear and to survive in this area when, you start life that small and you're pretty vulnerable to start with. So sometimes it takes 4 years of their life to learn all of that from the mum. What else have I got here? Yeah, pretty incredible to think that's the way that the cub starts, and it's as long as its claw will be later in life. This is a long claw from a grizzly bear, and you can see that would be a very, very effective digging tool. So that claw is I guess, what is that, 4 or 5 inches long, and this is what they use to dig plants and roots and bulbs and tubers that make up a large portion of their diet, and also helps them dig dens. An amazing excavation tool there. Let's see, what's the next question here? How often do the females have 3 cubs, and what's the survival chances for the cubs over the years? So, as I just said, they have the most common number of cubs that a female bear will have is 2. So most commonly twins, but they're not necessarily biological twins. They can actually be twins sired from different males, which is really interesting, isn't it? And so most common is 2. The next most common is 3. The next most common number of cubs is 1. And usually what happens though is that if you've got a small cub, there's been a very small cub hanging around the falls here this week, it can be the runt of the litter, and unfortunately, sadly enough, those cubs can end up being killed or drowned or killed by another bear or taken by an eagle. All kinds of things that can happen to these tiny little cubs when they're only 10 or 15 pounds in weight. Let me see the question again. So the survival chances, about 50% of them die in their first year of life, which is a really high mortality rate. I mean, imagine half of them die in their first year of life. It's a tough place to be a bear, even in a place like Alaska, like Katmai here, where it's perhaps the best place on earth to be a bear. About half of them die, unfortunately, and usually it's those small and more vulnerable ones that don't get as much milk, that are more vulnerable to predators and definitely more vulnerable to other males. They're the ones that are left behind in the line. Is it difficult as an observer of bears in the wild not to be able to intervene when you see an animal in obvious trouble and suffering? Yeah, wow, it really is sometimes. I'm an ecologist, so my training is as a scientist, so I try very hard to look at things with that detached scientific sort of perspective, but it's really difficult to do at times. And we saw some crazy stuff and filmed it. Those of you that saw Great Bear Stakeout last year, not last year, it was on a couple of months ago. We filmed it last year and it aired on BBC and Discovery a couple of months ago. Some of the stuff that happened on that show, I couldn't believe that we were able to film. a female losing one of her cubs to drowning as she tried to head across to a small island for safety. There was a bear that was killed by Van and Alice. We've already talked about that today. Horrible, horrible things happened to these bears. Solo, the cub that was left by its mum, the female, the mum abandoned him, which is a normal thing for these bears to do. It's just part of nature. And you watch this thing and you're absolutely heartbroken at times, but you've got to remember that this is a very natural, wild thing for these bears to do. So it happens whether we're there or not, and you have to let nature take its course. It's not for us to step in, but it's heartbreaking to watch sometimes, yeah. Let's see. Have you done any work with black bears in North America? Yes, in fact, a lot of the work that I do, I've not done a lot of hands-on research with black bears in North America, but the reason I'm into bears and have been for 25 years is because I fell into it quite by mistake in New Hampshire, that story I talked about earlier on, where I went out with a researcher and studied bears at the garbage dump. So that was a little bit of work back in 1987, that was. Wow, there's some good numbers of bears there now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them in that shot. Okay, did you see the bear at the falls yawning there? The bear at the falls just kind of let out this, and it looks like a normal kind of yawn that you or I would do, but actually it's a sign of low-level anxiety, low-level stress. So when you see a bear yawning like that, if you're having a face-off with a bear in the wild, not a situation you want to find yourself in, I don't want any of you to go there. None of you should be in that situation, because you should have made lots of noise prior to that bear having an interaction with you, having a surprise encounter. But if you were to walk around the corner and see, especially a grizzly bear, that's angst out and worried that you're there, and you're suddenly surprised that you're surprised, the bear is surprised, sometimes what you'll end up with is a bear that's yawning, and it can be deceptive. It can look like the bear is bored or tired, but actually it's a sign of aggression. And I've seen lots of bears right before a fight or right before some kind of aggression, looking like they just yawn. It's like, wow, until you learn that that's a sign of aggression and anxiety, not aggression, but a sign of anxiety, it looks kind of out of place. A yawn out of place is something very much to be concerned about. So yeah, black bears in North America. A lot of the work that I do here, I co-founded a project here called the Grizzly Bear Outreach Project, which is now called Western Wildlife Outreach, and it's designed to work with local communities to have them understand what bears are, what wolves are, what cougars are, what grizzlies and black bears are. So we have bears just a couple of miles from where I'm sitting here, on the outskirts of town in Washington, in Bellingham, where I live. And so here it's a case of being on the front line of where their habitat begins and where human habitat ends, and sometimes that crosses over. Sometimes there's a blend there, and so there's grey area, and that's where I love to do my work. So trying to figure out what humans need from that perspective, and trying to figure out what bears need, and how can those two worlds blend, because they always will. We're always going to live in bear country, and they're always going to live in human country, and the same go for other species like cougars in this part of the world as well. How can we make sure that it's a comfortable coexistence? So that's something that really fascinates me, and so we do it a lot here in the Cascades. A good website to go to for that kind of information is bearinfo.org, or bearinfo.org will get you there. What else? Have I got another question here? I think we're probably about out of time. It's 5:05. Thanks to Courtney and to Jonathan for setting up all the behind-the-scenes technology here. That's awesome, and I've really enjoyed this. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And I've got to say, my hat is off to explore.org, because this is incredible. Oh, I don't want to go. Okay, look at all those bears now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them in that one shot now. And isn't this the most awesome thing? I've got to tell you one quick little story about these wild cams. I was sitting on my computer yesterday, and suddenly it started chirping at me, and I couldn't figure it out. I'm looking out the window thinking it was a bird nest nearby or something. Could not figure it out. Finally realised that my browser was open, and it was their osprey cam. So it was the osprey that was chirping to its chick in the nest. So once you've enjoyed the bear cam here, go and check out the osprey cam. There's tons of these cameras that they've got set up, and it's really awesome. Play them in the background at work. Get everyone to look at them, because we all need nature. Okay, one more question here coming through. What's the difference between a grizzly and a Kodiak, if any? Great question. So you've got brown bears all around the northern hemisphere. They're all Ursus arctos. And in certain places you've got subspecies of brown bears. One subspecies of brown bear in North America is the grizzly bear. One subspecies is the Kodiak bear. So Ursus arctos middendorfi is the Kodiak bear. It's found just on 3 islands basically, Kodiak, Shiroyak and the Fognak, in that island archipelago just across the water from where these guys are right now. And then you've got grizzly bears, Ursus arctos horribilis, found in the lower 48, that are considered a subspecies of brown bear. So really, brown bears, Kodiak bears, grizzly bears, they're all the same species. They're all Ursus arctos, but what you've got is subspecies. So they could all interbreed, they could all hang out, they could all get along, except the big coastal brown bear like these guys would absolutely dwarf some of the grizzly that we have in the North Cascades, for example. You'd get a big grizzly male that might weigh 500. The biggest male grizzly bear that I was involved in capturing to radio collar was 650 pounds. That was in the Canadian Rockies. The biggest interior bear. Now that's a big male in the interior Rockies. You get to the coast, near where we are here in Katmai, where they're all feeding on these giant sockeye salmon runs. 650 pounds is a small bear. It's amazing. They can be double that here, but they're the same species. Oh yes, good idea. Look at this. Carmen is just handing me this. This is the real track outline of a bear track from a Kodiak brown bear. This one, there aren't many left of this size, unfortunately. A lot of them have been hunted out. But this bear was 2,000 pounds in weight. This track measures 18 inches in length by 11 inches wide. And some of these tracks are just mind-blowing. Here's another one that I can show you. This is a track that was taken from a lower 48 grizzly bear. So this is a real plasticast from a track. Actually, if you want to pass that one from over there, Carmen, that's the last one, that'd be awesome. Really nice. You can see the long claws on this one. Grizzly bears are famous for these long claws. So that's a lower 48 bear, pretty good size. 5 toes, long claws. If anyone in the North Cascades sees one of these tracks, especially with the long claws, they're different to black bear claws. This would be a black bear claw. You can see they're very short when you compare them to the grizzly bear claw. So we're always on the lookout for these. This is a track cast that I took in, it's right here, brown bear. This was taken in Katmai National Park in 2005. So this one I just used plaster of Paris, and you can see 5 toes again and really long claws. So there's my hand. I'm pretty big. I'm 6'4". I've got big hands, but you can see that some of these tracks really just dwarf anything you can imagine. So keep an eye out for them. It's great doing this plaster of Paris stuff, you know, but it really drags when you've got to carry 10 pounds of it around with you everywhere you go, and you've already got a heavy pack to deal with. All right, let's see. I think that's it. That was the last question from Courtney there. Thank you, guys. So this has been fun. Carry on enjoying the camera, guys, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to watch it for a little while here and check out the other ones. And I think Courtney is going to post some website addresses now. I'd love it if you went to go and see beartrek.org, watch our 90-second trailer, and you'll get a feel for what we're going for with this movie. It takes us to Peru, Borneo, Alaska, and the Arctic to see polar bears, spectacle bears, sun bears, and brown bears, just like the ones that you're seeing on the camera here. So, getting something for us all to be involved with. We're all in this together. beartrek.org. All right. Thanks, guys. Great hanging out with you. Take care. How do we switch off now? Let's see.